See how I said heck? Alright. Enough about nuclear missiles. Let's talk about helicopters. When I say here that in the Korean War, it was the first time helicopters were integrated into battle plans, they weren't used, they didn't bolt machine guns on them very much. They just used them to transport troops to and from the battlefield. You don't have to write this down, but World War II was the first time helicopters were used to rescue people and take wounded soldiers from the front line back towards hospitals and stuff. But then in Korea, this happened a lot. But still, not much in Korea in the way of bolting machine guns on the helicopters. But a decade and a half later, in the mid-1960s, in Eastern Asia, in the country of Vietnam, that's when helicopters, they started bolting machine guns and rockets on helicopters. They did it a lot. In fact, first they started out modified helicopters, and then they purpose-built helicopters and said, this is going to be an attack helicopter. There's just two, there's a pilot and somebody in the front operates the guns, and we don't even have room to carry anybody else around. So here is, this is the Huey, the UH-1. This is a UH-1. This was the big-time helicopter that gazillion of them got built and used in Vietnam. It was one of the first turbine-powered helicopters that went into production. It actually got rolling in the late 1950s, and we started building them in the late 1960s. And in fact, to this day, the United States Army has more helicopters. It used to have more helicopters than all the helicopters we have on the entire the U.S. Army has a lot of helicopters. In fact, the U.S. Army has the only pilot training program where you don't have to have a 4-year degree. The United States Army, you can go in and do this and become an Army enlisted person on a private, and you work your way into the board of officers, and you don't even have to have a 2-year degree, not a 2-year degree. If you get picked, they send you to war officer school, and then they send you to helicopter pilot school. Most Army helicopter pilots do not have 4-year degrees. All the other services, the Marines, the Navy, and the Air Force, if you want to be a pilot, you gotta have a 4-year, you gotta have a 4-year degree, you gotta have a bachelor's. Not trying to convince you to join the Army. Here's the AH1 Cobra. See, this is a purpose-built machine. You can see there's a pilot in the back, the gunner's in the front. You can put rockets and stuff on the side of the helicopter, and underneath the gunner in the front is a, I think this is a small Gatling gun. Which we won't discuss the difference between a Gatling gun and a machine gun. But when it can shoot 10 or 20 or 30 bullets a second, I don't think it really matters whether it's a machine gun or a Gatling gun. And they can probably, hell, for all I know, it can shoot 50 bullets in a second. So that's the Cobra. Both the UH-1 and the AH-1 were built in the United States. The Cobra was a dedicated, it was the first dedicated attack helicopter, so you could write that next to the Cobra. It was, we're going to build this helicopter, pow, and we're going to build it, and it can't do anything else except shoot bullets and launch rockets. The Mi-24 Hind, that's the Soviet Union's answer to an attack helicopter, but they had a different idea. They actually took a big helicopter that could transport troops, and then they turned it into an attack helicopter. Let's see your right, so wait, I'll show you a picture. Has anybody ever been in a helicopter? Has anybody ever flown a helicopter? Does anybody have a helicopter pilot certificate? That's all right. I used to be rich and single, and I spent my money, most extra money, mostly on helicopter flying. This is my first job after flight mechanics. Moved to Los Angeles, and I worked at a helicopter manufacturing company called Robinson Helicopter, and they had 2-seat helicopters. I was building them Monday through Saturday morning. I used to work overtime 4 hours on Saturday, and I would drive out to Riverside, and I took flying lessons in a Robinson helicopter. And I cycle it out. Helicopter pilot certificate, you have to renew it every year. That is the question. The answer is, regardless of what kind of pilot certificate it is, if you're the kind, not a drone pilot, a remote pilot, and a regular pilot where you sit in the flying machine, your pilot certificate never expires. Every 2 years, you have to go with a flight instructor for at least an hour of oral exam and at least an hour flying around to prove to them that you're still safe to fly. If they don't think you're safe to fly, you don't flunk, but you can't go fly. You got to come back and take another lesson until they think you're ready. So it might take 2 or 3 hours. And if you want to have passengers with you, in the last 90 days, you must have done 3 takeoffs to landings. And if you want to fly at night with passengers, you have to have done 3 takeoffs and landings at night in the last 90 days. And if you want to take your grandmother with you, wow, don't even get me started. So here's a picture of an Mi-24. There's a pilot and a gunner in this thing, and you can see the little stub wings sticking out on the side. There's rocket launchers, and there's, I don't know if those are cannons on the front or what. But the inside of this helicopter will hold 10 or 15 fully loaded troops. So the Soviet Union decided to do it a little differently. The United States has attack helicopters that can't carry anybody except the pilot and the gunner. And then we have a lot of transport or cargo or troop carriers. But in the Soviet Union, they have attack helicopters that are also transport helicopters. Which one's better? I don't know. All right, early civil airliners. Any questions on that slide? I'm just kidding. All right. So the de Havilland Comet was the first jet airplane to go into turbojet airplane to go into service in 1952. The river fight now is like I wonder if it would pick me up. The de Havilland Comet was the first turbojet airliner to go into service in 1952. It was all jets. It had 4 engines. It was made in Great Britain. A year later, the first turboprop, it was a turbine engine that spins a propeller just like that Tu-95. It was the first turboprop to go into airliner service. But they weren't that successful. I won't go into the issues, but the de Havilland Comet, the first 2 or 3 or 4 of them crashed. And so nobody wanted to buy them anymore, so it didn't work out very well. But the 707, it didn't go into service until 1958. But man, Boeing sold a lot of them. Boeing sold them to Transworld Airlines, which was an international airline. They sold them to Pan Am. They sold them to airlines in other countries. That Boeing 707, that's really, you could argue, the most important one on here, is the first successful jet-powered airliner. I suppose second is the fact that the Comet was the first airliner to go into service. And I'm afraid I didn't put any pictures on here. I apologize. That's all right. If we looked at pictures, we wouldn't be able to get out of here at 90 seconds till 3, could we? Didn't I promise we'd get out early, a minute and a half early? I didn't really promise. I just said so. Mr. Johnson, you said. Are you thinking that, Freddie Rick? You're just waiting to say that? No, you're not waiting to say that? Okay. You trust me to get out early without you having to remind me? So my apologies. I wish I had put, I don't know why I don't have pictures in there. I made this slide up last year, and I thought I went through it today and made sure I had pictures on all the slides, and I must have missed this for some reason. So the best I can do is ask for your forgiveness, I guess. You all good there, Josh? Almost? Yeah, almost? Yeah, you got it? All right. We're not even going to talk about light aircraft. we're going to watch a video about the Comet. First we have to watch somebody's advertisement, I guess. Huh? There we go.
The world's first commercial jet airliner made its maiden. In 1949, the Comet 1, the world's first commercial jet airliner, made its maiden flight. Designed and built by British aircraft manufacturer de Havilland, it was seen as the prestigious advance
for some reason
the UK.
My sound isn't working. Let's see if I can not ruin my computer. What's your question, Johnny? Yeah, well, they were film. They weren't videotape cameras. They were like 16 millimeter film. But yeah, there was a photo aircraft. So this is the Comet. This is actually a later version of the Comet in this picture right at this moment. Here we go.
In 1949, the Comet 1, the world's first commercial jet airliner, made its maiden flight. Designed and built by British aircraft manufacturer de Havilland, it was seen as the prestigious advance for the UK that was still recovering from the devastation of the Second World War. The British aircraft industry had been focused on military planes. After the war, this expertise, including Sir Frank Whittle, responsible for developing Britain's first jet aircraft, was redirected toward the production of civil aircraft. In 1946, de Havilland began design work on the AH1 intended to carry mail on the transatlantic route. The new plane would be powered by 4 de Havilland Ghost engines, but because of their low power, it was decided to save weight and use a thinner metal skin. In addition, this first version of the Comet would have square windows, and these two factors led to a catastrophic design flaw that would not become apparent for several years. In May 1952, the Comet 1 began regular passenger service. It was quieter, and its pressurized cabin offered greater comfort. Within months, Comet 1s began crashing in clear conditions, and the plane was grounded. Metal fatigue, exaggerated at the square window corners, had caused catastrophic failure. De Havilland had already been working on modifications, and with the introduction of the new, more powerful Rolls-Royce Avon engines, the new Comet 4 began the first transatlantic jet service. Though the new Comet was a good, reliable plane, the earlier crashes had damaged its reputation, and it now had a competitor in Boeing 707.
Now, in great ships of the sky, British captains and their crews wing their way half round the world to Australia in 33 hours, almost 13,000 miles.
So this is the Boeing 707.
Salt pork and biscuits are in the past. Now it's luxury. On board BOAC's inaugural Pacific Service flight to Sydney, caviar is the only reminder of the sea 40,000 feet below. Take-off time in London was noon. Now they're just finishing after-lunch coffee high in the Manhattan skyline. New York, they say, takes your breath away and loosens your purse strings. No time for shopping, though, this time. For soon it's onward again to race the sun across the United States to San Francisco. Not sail now, but 4 Rolls-Royce engines thrusting the first flight by a British airline along the South Trans-Pacific route. San Francisco, city by the Pacific, city of cable cars, hills, and links with the past. America's doorway to the Orient, the Golden Gate Bridge. By local time, it's only 7 hours since leaving London. But this is 6,000 miles from home with the tangy Pacific air and Frisco's famous seafood. New York's far behind. Soon this place will be too, because ahead and waiting is the magic of Honolulu. From San Francisco, onward again. Calling Honolulu, calling Honolulu. And what a pleasant answer. Now the crew of the modern Clipper change over. They can enjoy a well-earned rest. People like them helped BOAC to announce an all-time record profit of £23 million. Airfares are coming down, making it possible for more and more people to come to places as far away as this. It's hard to leave a place like Honolulu. When the next stop's Fiji, it makes it easier. This takeoff's different. Flying straight into tomorrow, across the dateline and the equator. Every one of the 152 passengers gets the momentum of the occasion. Communication, Fiji style. This is how the message of the flight gets round the island. The last stop before the continent of Australia. It's been an easy journey by the standards of today, almost halfway round the world in hours. Back in the days of the clipper ships, they'd still be fighting an angry ocean only a fraction of the way out from home port. Yet today, there is a man, Sir Francis Chichester, battling through these same elements, coming home on his great adventure. In air travel, a new chapter is born by a British airline. 33 hours from London to Sydney. Yes, the world is truly becoming a smaller place. A good thing for all nations.
So it was hard to tell on that one, but there's actually two pilots, a flight engineer. The flight engineer was running the engines and the pressurization and the electrical system and the hydraulics. And then there was a fourth person, the navigator, when this kicked in the late 50s. There was still somebody using a sextant and sticking it out the top of the airplane and measuring the height of the sun and the stars to figure out where they were. So we're going to watch this 5-minute on mutually assured destruction.
In Russia, the Kremlin had learned a lesson. Never again did it want to confront America from a position of weakness.
Недостаток ядерного оружия и слабость Советского Союза.
Lack of nuclear armaments and the weakness of the Soviet Union came as a shock to the Soviet leadership. It was like a cold shower for the government, who realized that these weaknesses had to be overcome.
The Soviet Union built up their nuclear forces. They added hundreds of missiles to their arsenal.
So they're hiding where their ICBM is. Yeah, it was just a pile of wood. Yeah, that's it. It's a pile of wood.
The Americans had to accept that, realistically, they could no longer destroy all the Soviet forces.
It became clear that if you said that your main approach was going to be to target the other side's military capability, what would happen is that those targets would proliferate to the point where there would be no limit to the amount that you would spend on strategic forces. The military on both sides accepted that they could no longer protect their own country from destruction.
The superpowers had discovered they had one thing in common, an interest in avoiding nuclear war.
It is an ironic but accurate fact that the two strongest powers are the two in the most danger of devastation. All we have built, all we have worked for, would be destroyed in the first 24 hours. And even in the Cold War, which brings burdens and dangers to so many countries, including this nation's closest allies, our two countries bear the heaviest burdens. For we are both devoting massive sums of money to weapons that could be better devoted to combat ignorance, poverty, and disease.
A grim logic was beginning to emerge. Nuclear disarmament was not achievable, yet nuclear war was unthinkable. By 1964, McNamara had concluded that his no cities plan was a dangerous illusion. War would only be avoided, he now thought, by the threat of mutual suicide.
McNamara, in particular, became totally convinced that the only strategy was what is known as mutually assured destruction, MAD for short. And what that meant was that the only way to have stable deterrence in the world was for both sides to be able to kill 25 to 50% of the other's population.
It's not MAD. Mutual assured destruction is the foundation of deterrence. Today, it's a derogative term, but it's those who denigrate it don't understand deterrence. If you want a stable nuclear world, if that isn't an oxymoron, let me rephrase it, to the degree one can achieve a stable nuclear world, it requires that each side be confident that it can deter the other. And that requires that there be a balance. And the balance is the understanding that if either side initiates the use of nuclear weapons, the other side will respond with sufficient power to inflict unacceptable damage.
Submarines now played a crucial role. For MAD to succeed, each side needed to be able to retaliate even after it had suffered a surprise attack.
You had to be able to retaliate even if there was a surprise attack. Don't you hate that? I hate that. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for letting me rant. I know I ranted a lot about several things. Hopefully you heard 10 or 20% of it. And you can use that in the future of your life to think about how you'd like the federal and state governments to operate when it comes to nuclear weapons. In any case,